My name is Matthew Varisco. I'm the special agent in charge of ATF's Philadelphia Field Division. I would like to thank all of you for being here today. We called this press conference to highlight two of our recently indicted firearms trafficking investigations and to recognize the excellent work of the members of our team here today, as well as our firearms trafficking task force in the region. Keeping our communities safe from violent crime is at the forefront of ATF's mission. One of the ways we do this is by working closely with our local, state, and federal partners to stem the flow of illegal firearms into the city in order to combat gun crime. Firearms trafficking is the movement of firearms from the legal to the illegal marketplace. It is one of the most pressing problems today. ATF works to address and prevent the diversion of firearms through great partnerships. The trafficking of firearms to violent criminals, gangs, drug trafficking organizations, and prohibited persons presents a grave threat to public safety. Many of you have asked me, where do these guns come from? Although many of the firearms recovered in Philadelphia are originally purchased in the state of Pennsylvania, there are many firearms recovered here which have been purchased in other states and trafficked into the city. And as you will learn today, the two investigations being highlighted have roots in South Carolina and in Georgia. Far too many of these recovered firearms are initially acquired through straw purchasing. Straw purchasing occurs when an individual purchases a firearm and claims it for their personal use when it is actually intended for someone else who is prohibited from buying or possessing a firearm. Straw purchasers are conduits for many firearms trafficking operations. Straw purchasers often acquire a relatively small number of firearms in each transaction, making it more difficult for law enforcement to discover the crime. Straw purchasing also makes it possible for firearms traffickers to effectively circumvent the background check and record-keeping requirements of federal law, thus distancing themselves from the documented part of firearms purchases. Straw purchasing is a federal crime, a felony. Straw purchasers are not just making a false statement on forms, they are enabling prohibited persons who are not legally allowed to possess firearms to victimize our community. How do we address this issue? As stated earlier, ATF's core mission is to combat violent gun crime. ATF and our partners with the Philadelphia Police Department, local district attorneys' offices, the Pennsylvania State Police, Pennsylvania Attorney General's Office, and the U.S. Department of Homeland Security and the United States Attorney's Office have been collaborating in furtherance of this mission. Dozens of our skilled investigators are working side by side with prosecutors to ensure firearms trafficking offenses are investigated and prosecuted to the full extent of the law. By focusing on firearms trafficking, ATF keeps guns out of the hands of criminals thereby reducing violent crime. Firearms trafficking is not just a victimless crime. It is illegal and puts firearms in the hands of prohibited persons and violent criminals. These firearms are often linked by ATF's National Integrated Ballistic Information Network and thus tying shooting events together. Straw purchasers will continue to be investigated and prosecuted, and straw purchasers will be held accountable for their conduct and made ineligible to purchase or possess firearms in the future. ATF will remain committed to placing our focus on stemming the flow of firearms into the hands of criminals. Although these indictments are significant, there's still plenty of work to be done, and we stand united in our effort to keep our communities safe from violent crime. Thank you, and I would now like to turn over the press conference to our U.S. Attorney, Jennifer Williams.
Thank you, and good afternoon. I am Jennifer Arbatier Williams, United States Attorney for the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. Just over 1 year ago, on April 8th, 2021, I was joined by more than a dozen heads of federal agencies based in the Philadelphia region, including ATF, Homeland Security Investigations, the U.S. Marshals, and many others, to announce our All Hands on Deck initiative. Together, we pledged to be all hands on deck to stop the violence and to support the Philadelphia Police Department in its work. Even though the violent crime numbers are still far too high, we are seeing measured, steady results. In addition, we have stayed nimble in an effort to address the violent crimes most plaguing the city. For example, the number of carjackings happening in the city escalated, so under the auspices of All Hands on Deck, we formed a joint carjacking task force with ATF, FBI, and the Philadelphia Police Department, and I was proud to announce last week that, through the swift and diligent work of the task force, in investigations led by ATF, our office secured federal indictments against 8 alleged carjackers, charging them with 11 carjackings. Which brings me to our announcement today. In the same spirit of being all hands on deck to stop violent crime in Philadelphia, we have also focused our investigative efforts on factors that contribute to shooting, including the illegal trafficking of firearms. Today, we are announcing 2 federal indictments charging a total of 14 people with gun trafficking and conspiracy charges. Both cases involve individuals illegally trafficking firearms from states in the South up into northeastern cities, in this case Philadelphia, which are then recovered at crime scenes, a phenomenon known as the iron pipeline. In addition, in both cases, when investigators researched the purchase history of the firearms, they noticed the brief time frame between the purchase from a dealer in a southern state and the subsequent recovery in Philadelphia, which is known as a short time-to-crime period. A short time-to-crime period is a likely indicator that the weapon was illegally trafficked. And taken together, these trafficking conspiracies are alleged to be responsible for illegally putting approximately 400 firearms on the streets of Philadelphia. Almost 400 firearms illegally trafficked to Philadelphia, made available on the black market to people who aren't lawfully allowed to purchase guns, each with the potential to destroy many lives. The first case is United States versus Norman et al. In this case, investigators identified multiple firearms recovered in Philadelphia that had originated with purchases in Georgia. Investigators dug in, and as alleged in the indictment, it was ultimately determined that these conspirators purchased nearly 300 firearms from dealers around Atlanta over the course of 6 months and transported them to Philadelphia for sale on the black market for over $100,000 in total. 11 defendants have been charged in this case with conspiracy to deal firearms without a license and related charges. They are Frederick Norman, Brianna Walker, Charles O'Bannon, Stephen Norman, Devin Church, Kenneth Burgos, Edwin Burgos, Roger Millington, Ernest Payton, Roselmi Rodriguez, and Brianna Reed. The second case is United States versus Ware et al. In this case, investigators identified multiple firearms which were recovered in Philadelphia that had originated with purchases in South Carolina. This investigation uncovered a conspiracy that allegedly purchased over 100 firearms from dealers around Myrtle Beach and transported them to Philadelphia for distribution. 3 people have been charged in this case with conspiracy to deal firearms without a license and related charges, and they are Mohammed Ware, Hanif Vaughn, and Jabril Vaughn. Now, earlier this year, the Justice Department announced strategies to target firearms used to commit violence, including cracking down on firearms trafficking and the iron pipeline. As revealed today, we are aggressively engaged in this work. Our goal is to halt the flow of illegal weapons contributing to violent crimes in our city and to support local law enforcement throughout. Now, at this time, I want to acknowledge and thank the prosecutors working on these cases. Assistant U.S. Attorney Priya D'Souza and Special Assistant U.S. Attorney Martin Howley, who is cross-designated from the PA Attorney General's office to the U.S. Attorney's office. And I also must acknowledge and thank all of the investigators and agencies who worked on these cases and provided support. I will close my remarks by reminding the public of the pledge I made 1 year ago when I announced the All Hands on Deck initiative. I promised that federal law enforcement would do all we could to help the Philadelphia police investigate the most violent offenders in our city. And we are. I promised that we would pursue justice at every turn by prosecuting the most violent offenders in federal court. And we are. At the time, I spoke directly to anyone who might be thinking about picking up a gun to commit a crime, and I promised them that we would be coming after them. And we are. We are doing what we set out to do. And yes, there is more work to do, but we continue to work day and night to fulfill that pledge we made 1 year ago. So now I speak directly to anyone who is engaged in illegal firearms trafficking, a known driver of violent crime. Consider yourselves warned. The 14 people indicted here are just the beginning. If you participate in illegal firearms trafficking to Philadelphia, we will find you. We will pursue a federal investigation and prosecution, and you will go to prison for a very long time. Thank you.
I would like to open it up for any questions.
The Georgia guns, that large number of guns coming out of Georgia, were those store purchase guns, or were they making legal buys at the gun dealer and moving them here?
There was both straw purchasing and legal purchasing going on.
And you first saw these guns at crime scenes and walked it back? How did you determine this was happening there?
That is one technique that the investigators utilized, that comprehensive tracing, and I can't credit the Philadelphia Police Department enough. The Philadelphia Police Department does a phenomenal job comprehensively tracing all of the firearms that are recovered here in the city. That is one piece of crime gun intelligence that we utilize to uncover these type of schemes.
But
and
you know these guns were used in crimes in the city of Philadelphia.
I was getting there, sir.
Yes.
So, yes, firearms that were purchased in this case were utilized in crimes in the city of Philadelphia.
Can you specify that, sir? Can you give us an understanding of shootings, homicides, what level of crime?
All levels of crime.
So some of these weapons were used in homicides.
Not all the weapons here, but yes, the weapons purchased in these cases were utilized in non-fatal shootings and tied and linked through our NIBIN system to other criminal events that occurred here in the city.
And can you detail the variety that we see here? I mean, what are we looking at for the benefit of the public?
You're looking at handguns primarily, and handguns are the number one utilized firearm in crimes occurring here in the city of Philadelphia and throughout the region.
I'm seeing like some very large automatic guns and then some very small guns. I'm wondering if you can be specific about what's the very small gun and what's the very large gun that we're talking about.
That is a rifle. It's a .223 caliber rifle, and those are small caliber handguns.
Are all of these 14 people involved in this scheme facing charges? Are they under custody right now?
There are some people in custody, and there are some people that we're still looking for.
Who are you?
Are the Philly people in custody, or are you still looking for them?
I believe.
The information
Yeah.
you want me to share?
Okay.
In the Norman indictment, 2 defendants currently remain at large. They are Kenneth Burgos and Roger Millington. In the Ware indictment, 1 defendant currently remains at large, and that is Jabril Vaughn.
Can you talk about their criminal history, if you have any, for the Philadelphia specific defendants? Do they have a criminal history?
I'm unable to comment on that now, but you can certainly follow up with Jennifer Crandall with follow-up questions.
Has everybody that you do have, are they being held? Are they being held on bond? Has anybody made it out, or has anybody been released in any way?
Some defendants have been detained, others have been released on bail. These defendants who have been arrested were arrested in their home district, so there were some proceedings in Georgia, some proceedings in South Carolina, other proceedings here in the Eastern District of Pennsylvania. Currently, in the Norman case, Edwin Burgos is detained pending trial, and in the Ware case, Harif Vaughn is detained pending trial.
The rest either you don't have or they've been released.
Correct.
Ms. Williams, you talked about the scope of damage that these firearms can inflict on our community. Can you actually point to a victim? Can you tell us someone whose life has been shattered by something we see in front of us here?
I would say, sir, we can potentially follow up with you after this press conference, keeping in mind, obviously, these are ongoing investigations. There's still a judicial process that has to occur here, which I know you're all aware of.
So what did you? So you're saying they were bought in Georgia in lots. Does Georgia allow unlimited legal buys in gun stores as Pennsylvania allows? What's Georgia's law, and how many guns were they buying in single purchases?
Well, again, I'm not going to get into the specifics of the investigation, but it's my understanding, yes, you can buy unlimited amount of firearms in Georgia. Some of these firearm purchases were single purchases. Some of them were multiple purchases. It varied throughout the investigation and the specific purchasers.
How were they moving the guns up? Were they moving them in cars? How was that happening?
Yes.
Cars.
Yep. Vehicle conveyances. Yep.
So several trips back and forth from
Correct.
these guns.
Correct. Yes.
Last question.
Can you tell us how many guns trafficked by these folks you believe are still on the streets of Philadelphia?
Unfortunately, there's dozens of these weapons that are still on the streets of Philadelphia. And it's, again, a real credit to the men and women of the Philadelphia Police Department and the other law enforcement agencies that are operating in the city, because last year we recovered a record amount of firearms, which highlights how important it is to stop firearms trafficking, to arrest and prosecute these straw purchasers that are bringing guns into the city, because every scheme that we don't identify, those weapons, unfortunately, are being used in crimes, and/or the Philadelphia Police Department has to take them off individuals that shouldn't be possessing them.
Thank you.
Thank
Can
you.
you release the pictures of these events?
We don't.
Hey, Matthew, of the guns that you know they bought, how many have you recovered?
I'll catch up with you later.